Samuel Richardson. Samuel Richardson was an English writer and printer, best known for his pioneering work in the epistolary novel genre. His significant contributions to literature include three major novels: Pamela or Virtue Rewarded, Clarissa or The History of a Young Lady, and The History of Sir Charles Grandison. Samuel Richardson had a successful career as a printer, producing nearly 500 works, including journals and magazines. He collaborated with London bookseller Andrew Miller and gained prominence in the book trade, becoming a member, officer, and later master of the Stationers' Company. Richardson was apprenticed to a printer and eventually married his printer employer's daughter. Unfortunately, he lost his wife and 5 sons. He later remarried and had 4 daughters. Despite his success in the print business, he did not have male heirs to continue the family print shop. Richardson began his literary career relatively late, writing his first novel at the age of 51. His decision to enter the world of fiction was partly driven by financial considerations. He had notable acquaintances in the literary world, including Samuel Johnson, Sarah Fielding, George Shane, and William Law. He also printed some poems by John Byrom at Law's request. Samuel Richardson's contribution to the novel genre, particularly his development of the epistolary form, had a lasting impact on English literature. His works, especially Pamela and Clarissa, continue to be studied for their exploration of character psychology and moral dilemmas. Despite late entry into the literary world, Richardson's novels remain significant and influential in the history of English fiction. Clarissa. Clarissa, or The History of a Young Lady, is a monumental work of epistolary fiction, often regarded as one of the longest novels ever written in English. It explores complex themes of love, virtue, and morality through the letters of its characters. The tragic story revolves around the virtuous Clarissa Harlowe and her sinister suitor Lovelace. The History of Sir Charles Grandison. In this novel, Richardson presents Sir Charles Grandison as a model of benevolence. The story delves into themes of love, honor, and relationships. It also highlights Sir Charles's interactions with 2 women, Harriet Byron and Signora Clementina, exploring their complex emotional struggles. Pamela. Pamela or Virtue Rewarded. This novel is considered one of the earliest examples of the epistolary novel in English literature. It tells the story of Pamela, a young servant girl who resists the advances of her employer and is eventually rewarded for her virtue. 2 years after the publication of Pamela or Virtue Rewarded, Richardson published a sequel, Pamela in Her Exalted Condition. He revisited the theme of the rake in his Clarissa and sought to create a male Pamela in Sir Charles Grandison. Since Ian Watt discussed it in The Rise of the Novel, Studies in Defoe, Richardson and Fielding in 1957, literary critics and historians have generally agreed that Pamela played a critical role in developing the novel in English. Characters of Pamela. Pamela Andrews, the novel's 15-year-old pious protagonist who narrates the novel. Her deceased employer passes her on to her son, Mr. B, who puts her through numerous sexual advances and even assaults before she eventually concedes and marries him. Pamela originally came to the estate as a young servant looking to make money to send to her parents back home. Pamela is also noted to value her virtue before anything else. Her virtue and her moral beliefs become her controlling purpose, which creates tension between her and her employer, who is making multiple advances towards her. John and Elizabeth Andrews. Pamela's father and mother, to whom Pamela's letters are addressed. Pamela hears only from her father, who appears in the novel alone of her parents. Mr. Williams. A young clergyman who attempts to help Pamela escape Mr. B's estate and delivers letters to her family. He offers to marry Pamela to secure her from Mr. B's unwanted advances, but she denies him. Mr. B has Williams taken away to debtor's prison. Mr. B. Pamela's lascivious and abusive employer who falls in love with and eventually marries her. Lady B. Deceased. Mr. B's and Lady Davers' mother, Pamela's late employer. Lady Davers. Mr. B's sister. She initially disapproves of Pamela's union with Mr. B for her lower class, but eventually warms to the modest girl. Mrs. Jervis, the elderly housekeeper of Mr. B's Bedfordshire estate. As stated in a letter to her parents, she becomes one of Pamela's best friends. Despite her good intention, she is nearly useless in preventing Mr. B's unwanted advances on Pamela. Mrs. Jukes, the housekeeper of Mr. B's Lincolnshire estate. She holds Pamela at the estate according to Mr. B's wishes and is entirely dutiful to him. She warms to Pamela once she marries Mr. B. Sally Godfrey. Mr. B is mistress from his college days. He has a daughter by Mr. B but removed to Jamaica and married another. Monsieur Colbrand helps in keeping Pamela at the Lincolnshire estate but proves to be protecting her and helps her escape from Lady Davers. Miss Goodwin, the daughter of Mr. B and Sally Godfrey. Summary of the novel. Pamela tells the story of a 15-year-old maidservant named Pamela Andrews, whose employer, Mr. B, a wealthy landowner, makes unwanted and inappropriate advances towards her after the death of his mother. Pamela strives to reconcile her solid religious training with her desire for her employer's approval in a series of letters and later in the novel journal entries all addressed to her impoverished parents. After various unsuccessful attempts at seduction, a series of sexual assaults, and an extended kidnapping period, the rakish Mr. B eventually reforms and makes Pamela a sincere proposal of marriage. In the novel's second part, Pamela marries Mr. B and tries to acclimatize to her new position in upper class society. Themes of the novel. Pamela was an early commentary on domestic violence and questioned the dynamic line between male aggression and a contemporary view of love. Moreover, despite the controversies, Pamela shed light on social issues that transcended the novel for the time, such as gender roles, early false imprisonment, and class barriers present in the 18th century. The novel's action is told through letters and journal entries from Pamela to her parents. Richardson highlights a theme of naivety illustrated through the eyes of Pamela. Richardson paints Pamela herself as innocent and meek to further contribute to the theme of her being short-sighted, to emphasize the ideas of childhood innocence and naivety.